what does it mean to be a woman especially of Indian origin in life, not to sound too philosophical, but in life, but also in business? What does that really mean? And maybe Smita, we can start with you.
Yeah, sure. The first person that comes to mind when you ask that question is the famous Indra Nooyi. When she became the CEO of PepsiCo, who by the way, I've had the privilege of meeting her and connecting with her. And I really, I think as a South Asian woman, particularly from India, the cultural norms of women with an Indian background is so different than what is expected and what is okay in the Western culture, that someone like Indra Nooyi really spoke to that clearly, which is the contradiction, right? The contradiction of you're a wife first, you're a mother first, and you are the one who's responsible for the house. If the milk is out, no matter if you're the CEO of a company, you're the one who's responsible for that. No matter how late you come back from work, you are expected to make tea. In many cases, not always, things are changing and evolving across the globe, but having those traditional norms and contradicting that completely, and a lot of times consistently, with the corporate environment where women are expected to show up, have a certain kind of personality, be very assertive, and then go back, and it almost feels like you're living two different lives at the same time. And I'll bring that home from my own personal experience, right? I am the head of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which means I should be the person standing up for equal rights, for equity in the workplace. And yet, when I go back to, and it's not just about my house, but when you go back to that cultural norms of, even now when I go back to India, most people don't ask me where I work or what I do, right? The question I often get is, you have 3 children, you're still working? Right? And that is the contradiction we are talking about. And I think that is relevant for most women, especially who have been raised in a very traditional Indian setup, and now they're trying to make their mark in the corporate world. That's a contradiction they have to face every day.
Well, Rocky, I'd like to bring you in on that part, because you were raised by a single mom.
Yes.
And so give your perspective, including that whole view.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm definitely of Indian origin, of course, and my culture has been a big part of my life, but I was born and raised in the US. My upbringing has definitely deeply impacted me as both a person and a leader. I was raised by my single mom, as you mentioned, and 2 older sisters. My dad wasn't really in the picture. He left when I was around 3 years old. My sisters are quite a bit older than me, 7 and 10 years older. And so I was really fortunate to be raised by a very strong woman, and she just kind of had to figure it out. I mean, she was an Indian immigrant. There was a time where she was working 3 jobs at once, but eventually she ended up starting her own company. She's the CEO. She did advising for President Obama. She was always involved in her community and cultural efforts, economic boards and commissions and everything. And so I think from a young age, I had a firsthand glimpse into that, especially because eventually my parents got divorced, which is a big deal in Indian culture, as Seema and Smitha can probably attest to. Nowadays, I think things have changed a little bit, but at the time, it was interesting just to see how my mom had to navigate through some of those situations and continue to just be a very strong, fierce, independent woman who had a seat at the table. And I think some of the experiential training and learning that I got from her going to all of those events and things really gave me a sense of just how to negotiate, persuade, and influence at the highest levels, especially when you have a seat at the table with typically only men. But I think the other thing that she did that really helped me personally was she wasn't afraid to leave her culture at home. So oftentimes when we would go to these business events, she was wearing her colorful sari and everybody else was in their black business suits, or even the women were sometimes wearing black, but she was kind of this bright person in the room. And she taught me it's good to stand out.
What attracted you? How did J&J attract you to come there, seeing that you didn't expect to stay 17 years? So give your perspective on what it's like to be a woman, Indian origin, and then how you were attracted to J&J.
Yeah, just in general, being a woman, I should say, is already a bit of a handicap to be honest. And so we still have a long way to go to get to equity. So then you have another whammy where you have, if you're a person of color, then that's even more of a disadvantage. And not to play victim mentality or anything like that, it's much more about stereotypes and the types of boxes that you automatically and unconsciously are sometimes put in. And those boxes are, for example, the longest time, and this is just everywhere. People will see my last name Kumar, and the number of people who will assume that I'm in IT. They will just think that I'm in computer science and I'm in IT. I'm in the IT department.
Right.
So there are those sorts of things. But we've all heard stories, I think, that as a woman, sometimes you come up with an idea or you say something and there is silence around the room, but then a man will repeat the same thing. And then all of a sudden people jump on it and they say, wow, what a great idea. Yep. And those sorts of stories that, you hear.